or one night after about 3 days of being awake, I'm walking around my house, peeking through the windows in paranoia, and my face would hurt. It was just very weird that my face was hurting. So I finally went and looked in the mirror, and I had the biggest frown pulling down on my cheeks. It was making my face muscles hurt. My name's Stephen Fontenot, and this is my story. Okay, so born in 1970 in a little place called Vidrine, Louisiana, out in the country. I had 4 stepbrothers and myself. Both of my parents had their own marriages before, and then got together, had me. But living out in the country, we were able to just roam the fields like we wanted to. So lots of just country type of living out there. And the times that I can really recall were good out in the country, outside of some of the chaos that we had at home. There was a lot of times where Dad drinking just would bring upon some different things in the home that were sometimes tough to deal with. So, my dad was a great guy. He really was, but he had an issue. He had his own issues of drinking. He was an alcoholic. He tried quitting many times and was not able to beat it back then. But it definitely caused a lot of chaos in the home. There was more than one time where whenever he was gone for a few hours and we knew he was coming back drunk, we were hanging out in the barn, hiding from him, because things would happen whenever he would get home. So, so that was just some of the things that how life was at that time. But had a mom that with 5 boys, she was a tough mom, but with a big heart. She was really a great person. So she was really our protector. She was really our I guess our stone, But so life was like that. But whenever I was about 4 years old, there was always a lot of hunting, and sometimes just shooting birds right out of the home, whatnot, with shotguns and whatnot. So there was always guns and whatnot around. So one day I picked one up, and I don't even know what I was doing with it, playing with it, whatever. And my mom came around and saw me with the gun, and, "Oh, get rid of that," and the gun went off. It was loaded. That day we lost my mother. So big change of life at that time. From that point, my dad was faced with 5 boys that he obviously couldn't raise on his own. So my 4 brothers, he sent off to two of them to a grandmother, and 2 others to an uncle for them to raise, as their dad was not active in their life. So him and I went and ended up going to live with my grandmother for a while. And this is where my sanity in life, I guess you could say, really was plugged into, was my grandmother. She was the one person in my life at that time that had just a normal life, I guess you could say. She was a woman that was a long, dedicated Catholic that really feared the Lord. She prayed all the time. She read her word every morning and every evening. And I'll never forget coming up with that and just thinking how bizarre it was. What for? What is the reasoning? But anyway, as a little bit of time passed after my mother passing, my dad moved on, started seeing another woman. We started living with that woman. They never got married. They were really more of, good times together, bar hopping, whatnot, doing their thing. But fortunately, I was able to spend my weekends with my grandmother. She lived out in the country. She was like a safe haven. She was a very loving woman. So that is where I can say that, honestly, I don't know where I would be in my life if it wouldn't be for her, because of her relationship with the Lord. Definitely held the truth of what our word says of train a child in the way he should go, and whenever he is older, he will not depart from it. That's what she connected me with. That was her connection with me with. She focused a lot on teaching about what's right, what's wrong, why not. So she was a huge impact in my life. Many times, I didn't agree with her, of course. But she also, of course, connected me with church, because she was at church every Sunday. And if I was going to spend the weekend there, I had to go to church. There was no compromising that. Kicking, screaming, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I went to church every weekend with her. And I thank the Lord for that woman being in my life. That was some sanity there. Growing up, my dad, he definitely did some things for me. There was, he helped me out getting baseball and some other activities and whatnot. But our relationship was real sketchy because of his drinking. It was like dealing with two different people. Great guy whenever he's sober, scared to death of him whenever he's drunk. And everything in between. So life goes on. We get to teenage years, and things start getting a little different between my dad and I. And he finally called it quits with the woman that he was with, and him and I ended up moving into a house that we actually built. And things went okay for a while. I was old enough to understand how to pretty much stay away from him whenever he was drinking. But in that time, I also learned a lot from him, like drinking and smoking. I think my first time of ever drinking on my own without him giving me sips of beer as a child was sneaking some beer and some wine out of the refrigerator, probably at about 8 years old. So by the time I was 12 years old, taking his alcohol out of the refrigerator, and his cigarettes and whatnot was pretty common by that time. Had already gotten drunk probably a few times. So, and also some of the friends I hung out with had some similar things. So we all did our thing. But then we get to around 14, I smoked marijuana for the first time. And surprisingly enough, it came from someone that was, would have never thought But the way it was put out was almost like this was better than, not as bad as alcohol. This is okay. And especially for a young person at that age, that can be very deceiving, very wrong understanding of everything. So of course that went on into another journey. It surely didn't stop there. It progressed. Turned 15, got a driver's license, and one day, after having dealt with my dad enough, I stood up to him. What started off as something that wasn't necessarily, I would say, a bad thing that I did at the time, but I got away with it, and I saw that, and then after that I rebelled, and he lost control, and he was not able to put me in my place at times whenever he needed to. And we began fighting. We were really fighting, physically, and going back and forth. And there was a lot of times I wouldn't stay home anymore. I started staying other places and whatnot. So I really started doing my own thing. By 16, I quit high school. Again, I think he really was maybe tired of raising children or whatever, and wasn't able to gain control of parenting again. I didn't have any respect for him, so I completely rebelled against him. Didn't want to do anything he wanted to do. And before then I used to say, look at a lot of the actions that he did and say, I will never do that. I will never do that to other people. And lo and behold, I did it 10 times worse. Took a while to get there, but I definitely got there. So after quitting high school, needed to get to work. So started working in the farm, in the rice fields, farming and whatnot. Making very, very little money, but still living with my dad in and out at times, fighting quite a bit. My grandmother's still alive and able to connect with her, but wasn't spending weekends with her anymore, so I surely wasn't going to church anymore. So by this time I'm drifting, I'm getting away from the Lord, with a little bit of relationship that I ever had with him. But I knew who God was. I knew of God, should I say. I would say that I didn't really know God because I didn't have a relationship with God. And I think there's a really big difference there. Because before I had a relationship with the Lord, I can say I really had a misunderstanding of who the Lord really is. So by the time I'm 18, tired of working in the rice fields, I ended up being able to, someone came to me and said, hey, you can go to school and be a mechanic, and they'll take you. I'll talk to them for you. And it's like, wow, here's my door. Here, I'm out of here. So I signed up and went off to Houston, Texas. Went to school for mechanics for a year, and from there, I can say my adult life started. During going to school, I was very busy with school and work. Didn't have much time for partying, thank God. So I made it through school. I did it and graduated. But as soon as I came back home, of course the partying began again. And at this time, young and just going out, being with friends and whatnot, drinking and some drugging. It was really just for fun. It wasn't, trying to cover anything up necessarily. Just doing what everybody else is doing and running along with it, and never really not seeing any danger in this at all. Even after my dad being an alcoholic, I didn't see the danger. Didn't see the danger. So by then, started exploring and finding other drugs to do, anywhere from pills to speed and whatnot. Ended up finding cocaine for the first time, doing that occasionally. It was more for special occasions and parties and whatnot. But again, just to be along with everybody else and just for fun. That's all it was about. But after a little bit of time, I ended up meeting my first wife and getting together with her and living together and whatnot. And she ended up pregnant, and so then we get married, and and she was also an alcoholic. By this time, I guess you could say we're both alcoholics. We drank quite a bit, but of course we didn't think so, but it was always just for fun. But finally things started turning there, where whenever we would, maybe get in an argument or something, then a way of washing it away was turning to alcohol, and maybe turning to alcohol, pretty strong, like, and then maybe smoking a little more weed and whatnot, but it always seemed like it took a little bit more each time to cover things up, and it didn't take long where this really became a scapegoat. Whereas anytime there was a fight, anytime there was a real problem, it was off to run into drugs and alcohol. At that time, it was mostly weed and alcohol. Trying to be responsible because we had a child, but still playing with that. So that goes back and forth. But through this, my dad actually started having some respect for me, seeing that I was actually growing up and being able to hold a job and be somewhat responsible. So we started communicating more and having a little bit more of a relationship. And then he quit drinking. A day I thought would never come. He finally quit. And I kept waiting for him to start up again, because I had seen this before. But he never picked it up again. And then I got to see a sober dad. I got to meet a man that was my dad. And we became friends. And we started having like normal conversations and enjoying our time together and wanting to visit, wanting to be around one another. It was very different. It was very good. But during this time, he also did develop cancer, and he went through treatment and got better for a while, and a couple of years went by, and he ended up with diagnosing of cancer again, in a different area, and he started doing treatment. And then one morning, got a phone call that he took his life. And for whatever reasons those were, there's a lot of speculation on that, but still, all in all, he took his life. And that was something very hard to deal with. We had finally become friends, and myself had with the accident of my mom and dealing with my dad, there was definitely times that I had contemplated suicide in my youth. So it was hard to see him do that. Yeah, it was hard to see him do that. So at that time, just tried to live, just tried to live. There was, at times we would go to church, my wife and I. Not very often, but sometimes. It was usually whenever we needed something. But after that, I slipped off a little more often from the occasional drug use to just a little more often. And during that time, I ended up getting arrested one night and put in jail. Next day got out, and that weekend we're at church again. Not even really knowing how to cry out to the Lord, but it seemed like that was the way. That's when things got really rough there. Even drugs and alcohol couldn't do anything for us. At least we had some kind of understanding of where we were going to run to. But we lacked a relationship. That's just all it was to it. Of course, this spiral definitely continued. Every time the fights would occur, there was more of these things taking place. Tried a program that was an outreach program for drugs and alcohol to get cleaned up, where you just went in, I think 3 days a week or something like that in the evening. Honestly, didn't do any good for me. My wife and I at the time continued to just get worse. We separated several times. After a couple of years, we ended up moving, trying a different place, and I started up a business, mechanic shop in Louisiana, and really just added to the stress that I didn't need, that I didn't know how to handle. So of course there was just more drugs and alcohol to cover that up. And this snowball just continued to grow and grow and grow. One day, I'm in my shop. It's 10 to 5. The day's almost over with. So I sneak around the corner. There's no one there, no customers there, but just in case someone drove up, I go outside, smoke a little bit of weed, go back inside. A customer drives up. We start talking. And as we're talking, there's a fuel tank draining and a heater, and it starts overflowing. I forget about it because I'm high, and the shop catches on fire. The whole shop catches on fire. The car catches on fire. We have a major disaster. Burnt everything in the shop. Shut down the business for 2 weeks. Wow. Had to replace everything. $48,000 in damages that insurance had to take care of. Yeah. Maybe if I wouldn't have smoked weed, it wouldn't have happened. Maybe I would have been alert enough to see that coming and not let it happen. But that's the calamity in life that you have in that kind of lifestyle. So, that night, what did we do? We went to the bar and got so drunk couldn't hardly get up the next day. So the next day, I had to deal with a burnt shop and a hangover. So it made things worse once again. Never learning from that mistake at the time. But anyway, we get the shop back going, and life continues in the same direction. Snowball getting bigger and bigger every day. Um, but finally, one of my grandmothers died. The other one that was so active in my life, she's now in an old folks home. So we don't connect a whole lot anymore. And the my wife and I at the time finally called it quits for the last time. And from that point, my life, I had no one, trying to keep me sober, or do the right thing. So I did what I wanted, and the next thing I knew, I found myself where I just gave up. It had been years I've been fighting to try to not fall into major drugs, but by this time I had started smoking crack cocaine. It was, the regular cocaine ran out, crack cocaine's more available, and I started doing that. That's about the bottom of the pit of drugs right there. But so being by myself, I was able to do it as much as I wanted to, and I ended up there. I ended up falling into that spiral of doing crack cocaine every day of my life. All day long, all night long. Years before that, I had, on one of my nights out, had ended up in a crack house, and it was dark inside. And I was like, why are we in a dark house? So finally I asked, why are we all sitting around in the dark? This is weird. And she said, well, they don't have any electricity. I'm like, you don't have any electricity? We're all smoking dope here. How do you smoke dope and not have the money to pay for your electricity? This makes no sense. Well, lo and behold, years later, I find out. So, I go on this binge of smoking crack cocaine every day of my life, spending $200 to $700 a day of doing this crazy drug. And, I've lost so much weight that my family starts confronting me about my weight loss. And they can just see that I'm different also, not just weight loss. There's something else. I'm different. No longer the Stephen they knew. Yeah, so family, noticing, realizing things, start confronting me. So I started avoiding them after that. And then, but after a while, it was kind of, there was no more hiding it. It was pretty much well known. I had a friend of mine drive up to the house one day and said, Stephen, you've got to stop doing what you're doing. People are finding out. Wow. And it was heartbreaking to me. I'll never forget, I sat there and cried and said, yeah, you're right, I need to do something, blah, blah, blah. But that ain't going anywhere. Later on, one of my sisters, half-sister, ended up getting me into a 30-day program. And that was, it was not a faith-based program. They even allowed you to smoke cigarettes while you're there. But anyway, I didn't make it through a week because I was smoking cigarettes in the bathroom. The one rule you couldn't break, I couldn't follow. Yeah. So I got kicked out of that, and once I got kicked out of that program, my family pretty much was done with me, and they just didn't want to really help me anymore because I didn't want to help myself, But so went back to, you know, doing my drugs, and by this time I had already ruined my business. There was really no business coming in. I started selling everything in my house, selling everything in my shop to pay for my addiction. By this time, I let my electricity go out in my house. So I plugged an extension cord into my house and my shop. That's how I had electricity. So I found out how you let your electricity get cut off from doing drugs. Couldn't see my daughter anymore because my ex-wife had done figured out what was going on. So then finally, I'm getting tired. One night after about 3 days of being awake, I'm walking around my house, peeking through the windows in paranoia, and my face would hurt, and it was just very weird that my face was hurting. So I finally went and looked in the mirror, and I had the biggest frown pulling down on my cheeks that was making my face muscles hurt. And I couldn't help but to say, well, this isn't fun. Doing drugs is not fun no more. This is horrible. So by this time I'm skinny as could be, and in a big old fog, not hardly understanding what's going on anymore. But there was two things in life that I had always said I would not do. One was stick a needle in my arm, because I knew that would be the death of me, and steal to support a habit or anything. But I was ready to do that. I was ready to do both of them, because I could no longer get high on what I was doing, and I was broke. Ran up all the credit cards, sold everything, had no more source of income. So my next step was to start stealing. So really at the bottom of my world. So one night I'm sitting in a chair, staring at the wall, and I said, there's got to be something better than this. And I thought about the Lord. Let me backtrack a little bit. Yeah. So about a year before that, there was a time that I had started dating a woman and it was while I was using my drugs and whatnot. But anyway, I ended up going to church with her, and I had always been through Catholic churches, but I had never been through an AG church. And this church was fun. This church was different. Everything was different about it, and I really liked it. And at the end of the service, I'll never forget, the pastor came out and started doing the call and asked, so if you were to step out of this church today, get in your car, and you're on your way home, you get in an accident and you die, do you know where you're going to from this? Do you know what's going to happen to you? And I was scared about where I was going. It didn't look good for me at all. So, Holy Spirit tugging on my heart, I went down and did the altar call, and I gave my life to Jesus. And I'll never forget, whenever after church service was over, we went, this woman and I went and had lunch somewhere, and I told her, I said, it feels like I just took a shower, like I'm just completely clean. It's like all of my filth was gone. Unfortunately, I put it all back on in a little bit of time. I think, just in the state I was in, I just really needed some help from others, So whenever I finally got to my end of where I knew there had to be something better. There was a sense of hope that I could get out of what I was in. About 3 days later, my sister, working through the sheriff's department, ended up getting me arrested on some charges she kind of arranged with somebody else. Bless the Lord. And had me arrested. And matter of fact, for my one phone call, I called her up and said, well, you got me. I'm here. She said, well, at least you're safe there. We'll talk later. Okay. So I knew, I knew there was some things that, there was a lot of voices going on in my head at that time. And I knew that was coming. I knew what it was all about. And I was actually trying to flee to another town because I knew it was coming. And it happened just before I was able to get out. So anyway, after about 3 days in jail, I'm put in front of a judge, and they offered me to go to Teen Challenge instead of facing my charges. And if I were to complete this program, that it's a good chance that the charges would be dropped. So I asked him, what does this have to do with my charges, my drug addiction? And he said, well, how about you understand that you're just a common thief right now? And I had to think about that. I said, I'll go to the program. So, not knowing what in the world I was going into, my brother kind of prepped me, but I surely had no idea. So we get there and drive up in the parking lot, and I get out of the car and I light a cigarette, and somebody comes running out of a building and rebukes me on the spot. Get that out of your mouth and put that thing out. You do not have cigarettes here. I'm like, well, okay, the last program I was at, I could smoke. Well, you can't smoke here. You mean I gotta quit smoking too? Yes. Okay. So then I could hear some noise going on in this building, and there's some singing and clapping going on there. And I couldn't help but to go and take a look, and because the front door was open, and it's a bunch of guys standing in a mess hall, standing around the tables that they're fixing to eat at. They're standing in a big circle, and they're all clapping and singing "Victory in Jesus." Oh, victory in Jesus. And I'm like, what kind of freak show am I in? What is this? So nevertheless, we unpack my bags, and they get me to go shower and come back and meet a few people, and it's very strange. It's very bizarre. But I try to do this and that. They go through all of my bags. They search everything that I have. They make sure I didn't come in with anything. But then they get me settled in, and we get started. So this program is like a military Christian academy. You have lights on at 5 o'clock, and you better roll out of bed because you and 20 other guys are going to share 2 sinks, and have to be in the mess hall by 5:20, dressed, ready to go, shaved, belt on, shirt tucked in, ready for your day, so that you don't get on the discipline board, which is a popular place there. So you had steps every part of the day. Once you finished breakfast, you went to a class. From there, you had different types of courses of discipleship teachings, anywhere from studying the Word to having a better understanding of yourself and life that you're going to work on with the Lord in your life. And so class would end usually about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. From that point, you would then get ready and go to work. You had different job details outside of, you would leave the grounds and go to other places, and we did everything from painting, carpentry work, and mechanic work, all kinds of different things, but always under supervision. And in the supervision, you were told what to do, and you could not do anything without being told what to do or permission of what to do. You had to get permission to go to the restroom, permission to get water. You learned what direction was. You learned what authority was. You learned about discipline. You stepped out of line in any kind of way, you would receive discipline. So there was a lot of different things that also took place in the workplace that was good training and teaching also. We got back in the afternoon, have dinner, and then there was some type of other teaching that would take place. Normally start about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. And then from that point, you would have your private reading time of the Word at about 8:30, and then lights out at 9. But it was Jesus, Jesus, and some more Jesus. It was, they really, really poured into you. But they also were very strict but very loving too. I mean, it was a fantastic program. These things, after about a month, I could say that I really figured out where the freak show was at, and it was the world that I once lived in. This place was a safe haven. It was finally a place that I didn't have to worry about anybody, or me getting out there to go do some drugs. So, there was one night we had a retreat while I was in the program. We went somewhere. And we did that a lot. We went a lot of different places. We went a lot of different churches. We went a lot of different events. So you stayed busy, did a lot of different things. But anyway, one night we're at a retreat, and during worship, wasn't thinking about my mom, wasn't thinking about any of that. Just out of nowhere, the Lord whispered, "You look at dying wrong." What? Why are you telling me this? And then it hit me, and I thought about my mom. And before you come to know the Lord and you really get an understanding about heaven and hell, we always often look at people dying. We feel bad for the person that died or something, and if they're saved and they're going to heaven, that's not the case. And even though it happened the way it happened, I looked at, maybe my mom was taken out of hell on earth. I don't know, and maybe that was a relief for her. But all in all, even though it was hard for us, I no longer felt like it was a bad thing for my mom, at least. And I felt the release, and at that point, I forgave God. And you can forgive God, because there's so often that we are angry with God for whatever reason, many different things. But I can say whenever I came to that understanding with Him whispering to me about that, whenever I came to that understanding and I forgave him, there was a release, and there was a burden lifted, I think, off of our relationship, and our relationship definitely, of course, got a lot better. So, yeah. So that is when I started to be able to finally understand the Bible. Not that I had ever read it much before in the past, but we had to have not just read the Word, but we had scripture memorizations where we had to memorize them, and then we had to work these things into our lives. So to be able to do that, you have to understand what you're reading. And it's there where I fell in love with Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, and that is just something that I live by every day. I still read my Proverbs, the book of wisdom. I love wisdom because I was surely once dumb, and now I can finally have some wisdom in my life and be encouraged about the future, about things. So many times reading, I was able to say, well, shoot, I surely wasn't doing that, yeah, in my marriage we weren't doing that. Yeah, we could have been doing this, and so I was educated. Here I'm getting educated, and it was very encouraging because, I knew that there was going to be a life after the program, and I wanted to do life different, So with all of this encouraging word, I was going to be able to live life different, So that's where the program really, brings you to a place of just living a different life completely, not just getting off of drugs and alcohol. That surely wasn't the root of the problem, but different lifestyle. So then I started being able to hear the voice of the Holy Spirit, thank God. There was many different times where, I was able to actually hear God, sometimes even question the Lord about different things and getting some different answers back. At one time there was one occasion where I was telling the Lord about how my daughter, she had walked away from me for a while, and she was tired of my stuff, and she didn't want to have anything to do with me for a while. It was understandable, but a few months passed, and it's like, hey, Lord, she's still not talking to me, and so I'm crying out to the Lord about this, and I said, she turned her back on me and walked away, and she won't look back. And he replied with, yes, and now you see how that feels. And I was just shocked that the God of all of creation, that I could actually break his heart. I would have never thought that, but we can. And that right there really made me understand the depth of the love that God has for us. And I never wanted to break his heart again at that point. So through that strengthened our relationship dramatically. So it was good. It was good. Sometimes these things from the Lord sting for a little bit, but they're good. And that was definitely one of them. So going through the program definitely began a change of lifestyle and living for the Lord, not just a relationship, but also living for God, wanting to do things in ministry and whatnot. So the ended up getting out of the program about a year later, but going through life again in the world, I started struggling again a little bit. But this time, after knowing what was good, I called the program back, and I wanted to go back. So I did this on my accord, my choice. Even though I had slipped and started struggling again, that's not what I wanted. So ended up back into the program as a student for a few months. Got things together. I really sought the Lord about why all of these things happen. Came to understand that some of my reasonings for ever doing any of the things were not necessarily all the best, and my reasonings needed to change. And it was really be more centered around Him. So, that's what I asked for in prayer, and that's the understanding that I got. So that's where my focus changed. And whenever I finished up there as a student, the Lord had been dealing with me about faith and trusting Him. And I had to come to the understanding that I did not trust Him. I was independent all of my life. That's all I knew. I didn't know how to depend on somebody else. And surely God was no different. But He wanted me to go out on a limb and tell the people in the program that I don't know what y'all about to do with me, but I'm not going anywhere, even though I'm finished here as a student. There was no openings for staff. There was no positions there for me to stay there. But I wanted to have faith. And it took me to go out on a limb for that to happen. So that's what I did. I went to the director and said, I don't know what y'all going to do with me, but I'm not going anywhere. And he said, okay. So they just had me assisting different things. But within 1 month, I ended up on staff because someone else left. It was a surprise, but to them, surely not to God. And just a few months down the road, I'm assistant director of the program. And, there, even though there was some leadership position, it was such a servitude, learning how to serve people instead of being served. There was once, I'll never forget the first time I heard it quoted about Jesus saying it's better to give than to receive. And whenever I first got into the program, I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard of. That didn't even make sense. That's how selfish I was. But I was able to learn that through serving and working there. So it was a great experience. Really grew me up a lot. A lot of maturity came through that. So it was really good. Of course, the relationship continuing to build with the Lord, baptized in the Holy Spirit, and being able to hear His voice on a regular basis, and that is one of the best gifts I ever had in my life. But little time goes on, and then it's now time to leave the program and go back into this world and do better at it. Do better at it, but do completely different. It seems as if once I got saved, my life started to crumble. But I went, I got saved, called out to the Lord to get saved, also prayer to get off of drugs and alcohol. I asked Him to help me to get clean, okay? But I went back to it, all right? But then that's whenever things really started crumbling. And this woman exited my life, and that's where I hit my bottom. So I do believe it was a part of, from getting saved, that the world that I was living crumbled. It had to. And that's what brought me to be able to get into the program and get my life turned around. By this time, I had been in contact, met my wife, to be at the time, Lisa. In searching for a woman, my next woman, I didn't know exactly what I wanted, but I knew I wanted a godly woman. So prayed for that, and that's definitely what I definitely what I got. Lisa is just an amazing, amazing, strong, Holy Spirit-filled, godly woman. One of those blessings from the Lord. But finished up the program, moved to Colorado, and as in the process of me moving to Colorado, I one day, had to let Lisa know that, hey, during my old life here, I've got a lot of debt. Ran up a lot of credit cards and all this stuff, got a lot of debt. And she said, me too, off of my first marriage and whatnot. I said, well, I guess we're just going to be some poor little church mice all our life. But we have Jesus. And, that's just the way it was, so we figured we were going to be paying on debt for ever and ever, and we're never going to retire. But at least we'll have a life with the Lord. You know what I mean? But the Lord had much different plan for that. But anyway, got here to Colorado with a truck, a trailer, and a toolbox. I went to work. Met Pastor Josh at Pueblo Christian Center, which just so happens to be a motorhead, loving cars. So of course him and I hit it off, and it was like hit the ground running. Once I got established in my place to live, before getting married, Pastor Josh, I think within a month maybe, sent me a church van to work on, and then lo and behold, a couple of people in the congregation worked on their cars. A little bit of time goes on. My wife and I and her family of 3 kids, we get married, and really start living this new life. And I always refer to, that was my before Jesus was my old life, and this is a new life. This is 2 different lives. Now there's no weekends aren't made to go out and party anymore, and more of family time together, being able to do good things, like go fishing, spend some time together, go to church on Sundays. We got involved in some other church activities. There was just a lot of different things that the church offered, that was really good for us to plug in, stay plugged in, and continue to get fed. And that was definitely something that I knew I was going to need outside of the program. And so definitely there. But completely different life, and whenever you, from the old life to program, now this is all new life. So this is what we're developing. But life just really keeps on flowing, getting busier day by day, seeing about the kids and whatnot, and I'm working at the dealerships, but started working also on some more people, cars in the church and whatnot, then we buy a house that has a shop, and I'm able to work on more cars, and so what started off in our church, in the congregation of our church, ended up spreading to other churches, and then next thing you know, I'm like, I can't hardly keep up. I'm working 7 days a week, till 8 o'clock at night, every night, and trying to do family, and you have to maintain some type of balance of family life, keep everybody happy, and keep yourself sane and whatnot. But so these blessings definitely had its challengings. Trying to keep a balance in life, and that even in that busyness, there were some times where, the Wednesday night services would sometimes get challenging to go to. But at that time we were having church services. But I made sure to continue my church services even on Wednesday nights. It kind of refreshed me for the week, but I knew that I needed to stay plugged in. Just really wanted to be dedicated with that. But after a while of all of the busyness, I finally had to come to a decision that one of them had to go. So quit my day job, went into business for myself, and started off at home. That didn't last very long. I needed to move, according to Pueblo West Metro. But at the time is whenever we had the big marijuana boom coming in, and all of the commercial buildings were basically taken up, or they were very, very expensive. But we ended up finding this little tiny place on the south side, about the last place I wanted to be. I wanted to be in Pueblo West, but so I overlooked it whenever we first found it. Kept on looking, went around the world, just to end up right back there again. And finally, I said, okay, I guess we'll have to go and look at it. So went and looked at it, and my first concern was, would the lifts fit in the shop? I got in there and I measured it, and I had 1 inch clearance. So these lifts just that they fit into the shop. Started out with this one little storage bay is what I rented, with one lift, and we got started, and had a corner office. We had one chair in it, and took off. Stayed busy. I was by myself at first, but only a few months down the road, I was hiring part-time help, and within, I think it was about a year, went by where another unit next to me came up available. That by this time I needed, so I rented. We moved into that. It had an actual office, so then I was able to hire full-time, and all through the business, one of the hardest things about the business was to keep up with the growth. I always said, a little Cajun coming from Louisiana that hardly anybody knows in Colorado, in Pueblo, for a business to take off like that, only God could do that. It was truly amazing, the whole ride. It was, like I said, it was just hard to keep up with. But in that hardness to keep up with, that is where God grew me a lot, in management and dealing with people, hiring people, just because there's a lot to understand there too, and a lot to grow with dealing with people and whatnot. So he definitely did. There's a lot of good that came out of that. And the business just continued to go. The business grew 15 to 20% every year in numbers, and it was just amazing. We ended up hiring more people. We ended up renting another unit. So now we have 3 units that we're renting. And we've got 3 employees and myself working there. We have a major flow going on. We're getting close to finishing raising kids. Lisa's 2 kids had already gone off to Army and Navy. They're doing great in life. And we have the last one, Levi, coming up that is fixing to graduate and go on his way. So we see an empty nest approaching. We have grandchildren growing up in in Louisiana, um, and through a couple of other different events, I felt it was time to that we were going to make our way back to Louisiana. So, but I wanted this business that was somewhat bizarre in Pueblo, because it was a godly business. It was one that people knew that they could trust, and I say that not to brag about myself at all, but this is something that the Lord had put on my heart. Not to be somewhat trustworthy, but to be completely trustworthy, to be completely honest, even whenever it cost me something. There was many times that I had to tell a customer, and it was hard sometimes, this part we put on your car didn't fix your car. And I would a lot of times fear that I would lose that customer, admitting to them that we had made a mistake. And instead, we gained the customer by being honest, and they valued that more than our talent. So that is what developed the reputation. And so that right there is from the Lord. That surely wasn't something that I would have done on my own. But we wanted to pass that on. We didn't want to see the business die, just go away, and all of our congregation and others, customers, to not have a place to go. So we put it up for sale. Definitely a process through all that, but and a big one. But we got through it, but whenever it was time to put it on the market, COVID-19 hit, and I said, well, I guess we're not going to sell the business. I didn't think it was possible because everything shut down. Well, so we just kept on, doing business, and then things started moving and whatnot, and then the broker said, it's time to put it on the market. I said, okay, let's give it a shot. And lo and behold, we put it on the market, and just a few months down the road, we find a buyer. And the business sells. Wow. And I just thought that was completely amazing, because it was kind of a needle in a haystack to find the correct buyer, because I didn't want to sell it to just anyone. We have COVID-19 going on. But lo and behold, the business sold. And that's another one of those areas I say only God can do that. So this life is just so different. It's nothing like my old life. It's night and day difference. It's blessings versus calamity. Haven't burned down any shops lately, and whenever we have problems, instead of going indulge in things we shouldn't, we figure them out. We pray about it. We figure them out. The Lord gives us direction. So our snowball doesn't, our problem doesn't snowball. It doesn't turn into this bigger problem each and every time. So therefore, life is much better. Over and over, over and over, life is much, much better. Now we're at a point where we're putting the house on the market. We sell the business, now we're getting the house ready to put on the market. Another one of those situations, we're getting things lined up in Louisiana. I'm going back and forth, and we put the house on the market, and even in this very active, hot market we have right now, we hardly get any response, except one. And that one came and looked at it, and that one put in a price on it, an offer, and that one bought our house.
Wow. That's crazy.
One phone call, one showing, one offer, and the house sold. Wow. Only God can do that. Only God could do that. So we we were packing, we were closing on the house Monday, and we were fixing to go start a new adventure in Louisiana. We have paid off all of our debt except for one. After we sell the house, we will won't take long that we will finish that debt, and then we will get into another house debt free because of the sale of our house, and we have a retirement being working in the process also. So we're almost completely out of debt, and we're actually going to be able to retire one day.
That's awesome.
That's something I never thought we would see. I've made contact with one of the programs there that I went through, and I'm going to go and visit them, and I'm hoping that I can just be at least somewhat active with them again, and maybe some other programs. I just I have a tug, I have a pull. I miss them. I want to be there again, and I don't know if it'll be. I don't know what it'll be, but I'm waiting on the Lord to show me. Lisa's gonna have her own business, do her own thing there with her coffee business. It's a desire she's had for all of her life. That's going to be fulfilled. And we're just, outside of that, we're going to spend some time with grandchildren and see what the Lord has for us in Louisiana. So, blessings upon blessings, and bless the Lord. Thank you much.